Hello, I'm Mimi, and welcome to our first face-to-face episode of Behind the Yellow Tape. I am so happy to be here today and so excited. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, for our first face-to-face episode, I want to revisit that D4vd case because it's completely blowing my mind and it has taken a major turn. The preliminary hearing is already over, and after 5 days of evidence and testimony, the judge is just like, yeah, that is enough here and we're going to trial. Now, that does not mean that D4vd has been found guilty because he's pleaded not guilty and we haven't even made it to the final trial yet. So, but listen, some of the stuff that came out during this trial and hearing, yeah, we need to talk about that. Because we're talking text messages, the DNA evidence, the Tesla, and Celeste's final night, and prosecutors finally giving us a better idea of what probably or what they believe happened. And I definitely want to know what you guys think about all of this once we get through some of this. But before we do get behind the yellow tape, let's roll that intro. Welcome to Behind the Yellow Tape. I'm Mimi, and here we share some of the most spine-chilling, gut-stirring, mysterious crime stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. So if mystery and crime is your cup of tea, then you'll definitely get your fill here. We upload every Wednesday at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you love a midweek dose of suspense, whether from your favorite seat, the car, before bed, or during your favorite activity, then leave a like to help build the algorithm. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. Now, let's take a step behind the yellow tape. So first, the biggest update. The judge ruled that there was, in fact, enough evidence on D4vd for him to stand trial in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. And I want to explain that real quick because I know someone's going to hear going to trial and think that D4vd was basically let off as not guilty, and that's not the case. We are not there yet. The preliminary hearing was basically the prosecutor saying, this is what we have, and this is why we think the case should continue. And apparently they showed enough, but this is what got me. They called 12 witnesses to the hearing. Like, not a few, but 12. Like, come on now. And the Los Angeles County District Attorney was already saying that what we heard over the 5 days was just a fraction of the evidence they collected. I'm sitting here thinking, like, if this is just a preview, what else do they have? Because some of the stuff we've already heard is already pretty serious. So let's start with Celeste's final night. According to prosecutors, Celeste and D4vd were arguing the night before she disappeared through text message, and those text messages were pertaining to another woman. Yikes. So apparently Celeste was telling D4vd that she was going to damage his career and expose him. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind for a little bit because we're going to come back to that when we start talking about motive. So the following night, D4vd arranges a ride share to pick up Celeste and bring her to his home in Hollywood Hills. And she arrives somewhere about 10 o'clock at night. Now, for me, that's too late for anybody's 14-year-old to be out, but I'm not judging, I guess. And then apparently she sends a text message right before she arrives, and then all of her cell phone activity just stops. And this is where I want to stop for a second. Because with all the messages discussing their relationship and all the things, we cannot forget one major thing, that this girl is 14. Okay? She was a child. So when we're talking about what she texted, whether she was jealous about the other woman or whatever, she was 14. 14. Now let's get into his phone because this is where I was like, okay. So according to testimony, investigators recovered messages and images from D4vd's phone that prosecutors say documented his relationship with Celeste. As a grown man, how do you have a relationship with a 14-year-old girl? Make it make sense, man. Make it make sense. So they were talking about marriage, talking about Celeste running away, about pregnancy and an abortion. And investigators testify about sexually explicit images in D4vd's phone with Celeste when she was about 13 and he was like 18 or 19. Speechless. But then the next part stood out to me. There had been this question on if D4vd was aware of Celeste's age, and according to the testimony and the hearing, there was a welfare check in 2024, and D4vd was told by the sheriff deputy that Celeste was only 13. So what do you guys think about that? Because for me, I don't know how you can look at a child and think, wow, I would love to give that child everything, marriage, babies. It's beyond me. It's really sick. Because if prosecutors can establish that D4vd was directly told about Celeste's age, that whole spiel about I don't know is going to make that conversation a whole lot harder. And I guarantee we're going to hear about that again when he goes to trial. Now, let's move away from the phone situation because the physical evidence is where everything gets crazier. In the hearing, there was testimony about DNA being found and connected to the blood evidence that they found on the property. They also found tiny plastic fragments that were associated with Celeste's remains and consistent with an inflatable pool that they gathered in the investigation. Whoa. And then prosecutors bring up purchases. They presented records that they say show D4vd buying things like chainsaws and inflatable ore wading pools. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that somebody going to go buy a chainsaw is someone committing a murder. Not necessarily, but this is why we're going to trial. But when prosecutors started putting everything next to each other, like the text messages, the DNA, the pool, the house, the ride shares, the purchases, and then the Tesla, you can definitely start seeing the story that the prosecutors are trying to tell the jury. And speaking of the Tesla, this is still one of the biggest questions in this whole entire thing for me. Because Celeste's remains were found in a Tesla registered to D4vd. Think about that. Just think about it. A missing 14-year-old girl's remains are discovered inside of your car. And so naturally, people are going to want to know, how did she get there? How long had she been in there? And who had the access to the car? So it's said that there's actually surveillance that D4vd was the last one known to drive that Tesla in late July before it was left parked near his home. And that was before he went on his international tour. And this is why I want to see what the defense is going to do in this trial, because they're going to have to attack this timeline fiercely, and they're going to have to make like a reasonable doubt around some of the connections that the prosecutors are already making. And to be fair, the defense is already pushing back. D4vd's attorneys argued at the preliminary that the prosecutors haven't shown enough evidence to say that he deliberately killed Celeste. But remains were found in the Tesla registered. I want to keep going. They challenged part of the medical evidence. They questioned the prosecution's history, and they also brought up some of Celeste's text messages, and that was during the cross-examination. And he still pleaded not guilty. So we're going to hear much more from them when we finally get to trial, but I think that's something that people fail to understand, that a preliminary hearing and a trial are not the same thing. So right now, the prosecutors only needed enough information to convince the judge that this case should continue. Now, at trial, they're going to have to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt, and that is a completely different ballgame. Now, let's go back to those text messages I was talking about earlier. So you remember when I was saying that Celeste was threatening to expose D4vd? Well, prosecutors are saying that that could possibly help establish a motive. Their theory was that D4vd was afraid of his relationship with Celeste and it coming out because it could completely destroy his music career, and at this point, his music career was taking off. So according to their theory, D4vd had a lot to lose: career, money, reputation, everything. But there is another detail. Because D4vd's first full-length album was released just 2 days before Celeste was believed to be killed. So what do you guys think about that? Do you think the prosecutors have a good enough motive, or do you need to hear more? Because motive isn't the same thing as proof when we're talking about somebody committing a murder. All right, but when you add the motive, the physical evidence, the digital evidence, and a timeline, that's when the prosecutors start trying to build a bigger picture. And that's basically where we are right now, because D4vd has officially been ordered to stand trial and he's in custody without bail. And there's so much more that we haven't even heard yet. And honestly, this is why this is the type of story that I'm going to keep revisiting and following here. That's just that. And because I don't want to come back when there's a verdict. And if something happens in court, we're going to talk about it. If new evidence gets released, we're going to talk about it. And if defense comes out and completely challenges something we talked about today, we're going to talk about that too. Now, before you go, I need you guys in the comments because I want to know what stood out to you the most. Because for me, it was the deputy allegedly telling D4vd the girl's name. I meant the girl's age. I don't know what I'm talking about. He knew the girl's name. And that's definitely up there for me. Like, maybe for you, it was the ride share, the DNA, the purchases, or the Tesla. Or maybe you're just sitting here saying, like, Mimi, I'm still not convinced. And I need to see what happens after the trial. Personally, I'm going to think that you need help. And that's fair too. But tell me why. Lock it in the comments. I want to hear what you guys think. And if you know about another current case or update you would like to see me speak about on Behind Yellow Tape, drop that in the comments too. Please, please, please. I want to know what you guys want to hear, what you want to talk about. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss an episode every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for tuning in to the first face-to-face episode of Behind the Yellow Tape. And as always, I'm Mimi, and this has been another step Behind the Yellow Tape. See you next Wednesday.